We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including some trade talk around the Montreal Canadiens. We're going to take a look at some potential changes and some values that we could see on their blue line, as well as the Carey Price contract, the return of Kirby Dach, and how things are going on that front. Plus, we have some big updates from Sens GM Steve Staios on the contract extension talks with Shea and Pinto, the return and recovery of Nick Jensen from a big surgery, big update from Frank Saravalli on the World Cup of Hockey for 2028, and we also have a fairly significant update as well on expansion and what might be coming down the pipe after some comments on the interview with Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly. All that and more coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. A couple quick items, and we'll get into some of the longer discussion points here, including the expansion, some details on the Senators, and some trade talk and updates around the Montreal Canadiens as well. We did get an announcement on their social media platform today from the Seattle Kraken, confirming that they are indeed going to be revealing a third jersey soon. They've been doing some really good content. I will give them credit on their social media. Their team has been doing a phenomenal job at the marketing side of things. At least I think they have. But on September the 4th, the Seattle Kraken will reveal their first ever third alternate jersey. So stay tuned for that if you're a Kraken fan or you just love lots about the NHL jerseys. There'll be an interesting concept being released there in the not too distant future. Also some updates today on the World Cup of Hockey that's going to be taking place in 2028. The planning process is well underway. NHL insider Frank Saravalli talking on Bleacher Report today had some updates on what countries are likely going to participate, and he broke them down into three categories with your shoo-ins, your what he called on the cusp. So, potential ones, and then ones that are long shots. So obviously the teams that were at the Four Nation tournament are slam dunks, will be 100% participating. So you're looking at Canada, the USA, Sweden, and Finland. We're looking at other countries that he felt were very, very likely to be included would be Czechia and Switzerland. Now, that's not a huge surprise. They both have some prominent NHL players, pretty strong hockey programs, have good results internationally. So there's really no reason to think that that's a surprise. That would give us 6 teams. It is expected to be an 8-team tournament. Now, the countries that are going to be the interesting ones that are on the cusp, as he says, includes Russia, Germany, and Slovakia. Now, the Germans, of course, have some pretty high-profile NHL players. You would like to think, with it being an NHL event, that Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, and all the owners around the league would like to see their top stars. Look at Leon Draisaitl, for example, one of the league's best players, hails from Germany. You've also got some other bright young talent that are kind of becoming top stars, like Tim Stützle and Mo Seider and JJ Peterka. There's a pretty good list here of some pretty solid German-born players. So ultimately, I think they could have a pretty competitive team. That's an interesting country that I really think they really should be in it. And of course, you have Slovakia, who's no slouch, has a pretty solid hockey program as well, has some pretty good players. Then the big question point, as he put it, is the Russian team, and really not sure how this is going to be handled. It's hard to predict where things are going to be at from a geopolitical standpoint. When we get close enough that they have to make a judgment call and 100% firm up who the countries are going to be. Obviously, it makes it hard because there is a lot of really good Russian hockey players, and for it to be considered a really true best-on-best tournament, many people feel like, they should, for it to be considered that they would have to be there. Ultimately, I think a lot of people understand why they have not been included. And I know there's different opinions out there on whether or not they should be able to or not. I mean, we've seen other situations in the past when it comes to the Olympics that Russian athletes were able to participate, but they weren't able to participate under the Russian banner. I don't know if there's some way that they figure things out to do it in a different way. I really don't know. But basically what Frank was saying is that they are under consideration. And obviously having them being able to participate if the climate justifies it, then would be, I think, big for the tournament. But at the same time, you're probably looking at countries like Germany and Slovakia are likely going to be the 7 and 8 countries to round out the tournament, should that not be an option. I'd be curious to see what would happen if they were able to participate. Who would be the odd team out? I mean, Germany and Slovakia, I think the German team probably has more high-end younger talent, star talent, but the Slovakian team have some really good players too. So, how do you have them not participate? I mean, or do you? I mean, at this rate, that's what they're planning for, is an 18 tournament. I don't know if it'd be possible to consider making it bigger, but he considers countries like Latvia, Denmark, Norway, and France, who's had a big uptick in their program, considered long shots. He mentions Italy as well, of course, where the Italians are going to be hosting the 2026 Olympics here coming up in February, but obviously we'll put them along with France as being a likely long shot. But at the end of the day, we're probably going to see Canada, US, Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Switzerland, Slovakia, and Germany based on how things are today. But the big wild card and all of it will be the Russian team, which we don't know how things are going to be in a few years' time. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have what I would call a fairly significant update on expansion. For the first time, I think we're kind of hearing NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly do an interview here with Michael Russo, the Athletic. And like I said, for the first time, we're kind of hearing from the league perspective, being a little bit more open about the idea that we're likely going to see expansion. I mean, generally, whenever you've heard Bill Daly or Gary Bettman comment on expansion here anytime recently, it's usually been pretty much shut it down, that there's no formal plan, there's not going to be a process. As of right now, there's nothing firm. But for the first time, he kind of acknowledges a little bit more of the details of what they've been working on behind the scenes here. So a couple of interesting quotes I thought from this interview includes Bill Daly saying that there are multiple entities within multiple markets talking to us. So obviously, like we've heard, that's not a rumor, that's confirmed by Bill Daly, that there are some markets that have multiple ownership groups trying to get a team. And I think that holds true for Atlanta for sure, and maybe others. I wouldn't even think it's, from what I've heard, I think it could be a possibility for Houston as well, who's also, besides Atlanta, probably the very next team that would be the most likely. I mean, they're two of the bigger markets in the U.S. that the NHL is not in right now. I believe Atlanta is the 8th biggest market, and Houston is the 5th. So, I mean, there's a reason why I think the NHL can do this more so than the other pro leagues. They might have a bigger appetite because of the fact that they have all the Canadian teams. There's a lot of U.S. markets that they're just not in right now. And obviously, outside of, you get Major League Baseball, they only have Toronto. You get the NBA, they only have Toronto. The NFL has nobody. So, they don't have all those other Canadian markets. So, yeah, they have a big league in the NHL, 32 teams, but there's still a bunch of prominent U.S. markets that are not included. So there's opportunity there for sure to expand it as long as you have the talent pool to support it. Now, he also says here, besides the fact that they've got multiple entities within multiple markets, talking to the league about potentially getting a team, none have gotten to the point where they've made a full-on proposal that they thought was strong enough to take to the Board of Governors. Now, he says one of those could happen in the future, and he semi-expects it to happen in the future, but we're not quite there as of yet. He also admits that they've been having continued meetings with groups from Atlanta, and they've met with them as recently, it sounds like, as July. And obviously, Atlanta seems to be the location with the most momentum right now for expansion to become the 33rd NHL franchise, given the fact that we've had big updates from local government approving a $3 billion development, including an arena. So, I mean, obviously they're well on their way to securing everything that they need to get everything in place to make it happen. And, of course, the league has been wanting to give that market another shot for a while and strongly believes that with the right ownership, that they can make it work. And we also got some updates today from the GM of the Ottawa Senators making an appearance on the Coming In Hot podcast with Jason York and Brent Wallace, talking about a few key things. One that I thought was interesting was the return and recovery of veteran defenseman Nick Jensen. We know Jensen had a pretty significant surgery here in the offseason. We know it was a hip-related injury and obviously a big surgery. It turns out that we found out from Nick Jensen was on the show himself a couple days ago and had revealed that he actually played with that injury for about more than half the season. It was quite early in the year when the injury took place, and by the end of the year you could see he was having a really, really tough time with it, but did his best to try to play through the pain and the discomfort that he was experiencing with it. But Steo says that Jensen has been beating his timeline on return. We've seen videos of him, of course, posted through social media throughout the offseason where he was rollerblading and skating, and he looked pretty good. But then again, just because he looks good skating, it doesn't really mean that he's ready for contact and that he's ready for a full-fledged NHL game and all that, right? But Steo says he's been beating his timeline on return, but they want to be careful. They want to make sure that obviously he's fully recovered. They don't want to have him, go into a return and then have setbacks. They want to make sure when he's ready to come back that he's fully ready to come back and can obviously, sustain playing like he normally would. Obviously, where it was such a significant surgery, they want to make sure that they do things right here. So it's a promising update. Obviously, if he's unable to start the season, that will create a hole in the lineup, but the addition of Jordan Spence will hopefully alleviate the pressure, and Spence can play a little higher in the lineup than he might when everybody's healthy, but I think he's capable of handling those extra minutes, which, like I said, might make that addition to be even more valuable. But ultimately, Steo said that we'll see where things are at with Jensen. When he arrives for training camp, they can get a better evaluation for him, but things are progressing well on that front. He was also asked about, of course, Shane Pinto, who's into the final year of his contract, so he's now eligible for an extension. The last contract extension, or when he was RFA in the last couple of years here, has kind of been, a little bit contentious. We know his agent is notorious for driving a hard bargain, and they had a whole situation there where they were dragging on getting him signed. Negotiations were really, I don't know if I want to use the word contentious, but they were really drug out quite a long stretch, and then he ended up getting that weird suspension for gambling for 41 games, and then it didn't matter. And then when he came back, he signed league minimum because he didn't really have any leverage after the suspension from the NHL. And then from there, they came to terms on a 2-year deal afterwards, and now we're into the final year of it. But Staios made it clear that they definitely had started negotiations for an extension, so they've had some conversations throughout the summer. Doesn't sound like they were super far along or like advanced talks or anything like that, but they've definitely had some talks, and that he sees Pinto as being a core player that he would essentially like to lock up long term, but it's a matter of getting to that point where they can obviously both agree. But he said that he's, based on the conversations they've had so far, that he's confident that when the time is right, that they'll be able to get a deal done and extend him, hopefully on a longer term basis. But we'll see. But obviously it's good to know that negotiations are underway, and kind of go from there. And now he will still technically be restricted at the end of expiry of his contract. But based on how things went last time with negotiations, like I said, with his agent being so it's notorious stickler for dragging things out, that you want to get ahead of it for sure, so that hopefully he doesn't have any situation where he misses time, misses camp, or anything of the such. Now, a bunch of updates on the Montreal Canadiens. One, we'll start with an injury update on Kirby Dach. We talked at length some of the reports here in the last few weeks. It's been a little bit since we've had an update, but I think about earlier in August, we've had multiple reports saying that he very well could miss time to start the season, that he's had maybe a slower recovery or setbacks. There's been different reports out there. I don't know that we've really had setbacks. Honestly, I just think that it's maybe taking a little longer to get to the point that he needs to be than you would think. But at the same time, he's had a significant knee surgery, and he's had multiple significant injuries to that knee. So obviously, maybe it's taking longer than normal to recover and heal and be ready to go. But obviously, Doc has been seen skating here as of late in Montreal at the practice facilities with some of his teammates, so that's promising. Whether or not he's ready to start the season, it's like Jensen. Like I said, it's hard to say. We've seen Jensen skating too, but it doesn't really mean much, to be honest, because you don't know really. You don't get to see everything. You only see like, a 15, 30-second clip. That's only a small sample of what they were doing on the ice. So the fact that he's in Montreal and he's skating with his teammates is promising, but that's about all we can really say on that front. Of course, the closer we get to September, being the final week here, getting into that stretch of September 1st, should mean that we see a Carey Price contract trade in the relatively near future. We're still seeing that that's likely going to happen to create the cap flexibility that Montreal needs. And again, still likely nothing's really changed with enough teams that it's the same kind of, usual suspects, if you will, that are the most likely landing spots for that contract to be moved to, whether it be Chicago, San Jose, Pittsburgh, probably one of those teams. That way, as the season unfolds, they can use that to get to the salary cap floor. Teams that are likely going to be in the lottery and likely move out some veterans by the deadline so that they don't have to worry about dipping under the cap floor, and it also gives them a little more leverage when it comes to making those trades later in the year. They don't necessarily have to take contracts back either. They can focus more on making future-based deals because they won't be in a situation where they need to make sure they're cap compliant from a floor perspective. So the Price trade getting closer, but obviously it's not quite time for that to happen here just yet. We've also seen a lot of chatter, numerous articles out there saying that Mike Matheson is likely going to be the next Montreal Canadiens defenseman to be traded. And that might be true, but, I was looking things over, and at the same time, I might say, maybe that we should pump the brakes on that concept. I don't know that that's going to be something they rush into. I don't know that they didn't necessarily go out and extend them right away either, but if you take a look at their decor, they may want to hang on to Matheson a little bit longer. I mean, obviously with the acquisition of Noah Dobson, between Dobson, Hudson, and Gooley, those three guys really should all play ahead of Matheson, but you could put Matheson possibly on the second pair. Obviously between Dobson and Matheson, you got Hudson, you got Gooley. Now, one of those guys would likely have to play their weak side, which is a possibility. But that's not unusual. Then besides them, you've got Jaden Struble, Arbor Jacki, and Carrier. Carrier could be on your third pair. I think if he's on your third pair, your decor is a little bit deeper. He easily could play in the second pair as well. So you have options. But for example, let's just say that you do put Matheson on the third pair, which just seems like, I think that's too low for what he brings. For one, his style of game, the amount of minutes he can normally play, I don't know. I think you're more likely to see Matheson play in the top four, and whether it be him or Gooley, play on their weak side, and then pair one of them with Hudson and one with Dobson, and then your third pair is likely going to be Carrier on the right and either Struble or Jacki on the left, and one of them will be the extra. So I don't know. When looking at how the decor shakes out, if you put Matheson as maybe being, when in terms of experience and just overall game, you might want to hang on to him so that you don't have so little experience, after your top offensive guys. However, Matheson's value could drop. It's the concern here. He's only making $4.5 million, so the contract's valuable. But given the fact you have Dobson and Hudson, he's not going to get nearly as many offensive starts. He's not going to really see the power play unless there's an injury. His numbers offensively likely will take a dip. So there is that you might have to be worried about. His ice time could drop a bit as well. But, I guess you have to be cognizant of if his value goes too low. Is it, for the role you can give him, will it hurt his value too much? That's a question I'm not sure the answer to, but I don't know. But with the number of young defensemen in that lineup, maybe they should hang on to him, because you need a lot of D. It's only 7D. Outside of that, you got Reinbacher in the minors. I guess once you're confident and comfortable that Reinbacher is ready for NHL duty on a consistent basis, that would be the time when I think Matheson probably has to move on, and or somebody does off that decor, and that very well could be next year. I wouldn't be so shocked if Reinbacher maybe gets NHL games this year, but maybe not, ready for full-time duty. That's just a guess. I don't know. I'm not quite sure exactly where his development is at, but something to keep an eye on for sure. And speaking of the defenseman, I know there's been a lot of chatter over the offseason about the value, whether or not he should stick around, or if they did trade him, what could a return be, or do they change positions with Arber Xhekaj? I know I was looking at Brian Wild, analyst who often appears with Tony Marinaro on the podcast. They were talking about Xhekaj's value. In his opinion, he thinks if they were to trade Xhekaj, that they could get a second-round pick. But they have plenty of second-round picks, so that wouldn't make sense for them to do. So that the only way that they would trade him is if they were offered a first-round pick. That's the only thing that they would be willing to. Now, of course, he didn't really get into like a lot of about the, maybe a roster player coming back, but is anybody going to offer a first-round pick for Arber Xhekaj? Like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but there's just no way in hell that's happening. I'm sorry. A second-round pick, I think, is even generous as well. You're talking about a third-pair defenseman. Like, you don't get big value there. Like, now the thing with Xhekaj that he says is that the rest of his comments kind of says that a first would be the only way that it would be the only thing they would be willing to take that would be a big enough value that would be like, okay, we have to do this. This is just too good to pass up. But he also says that he doesn't see him being traded. The organization loves him, and he's a unicorn. And to some degree, he's a unicorn, but not really. I mean, if you think about it, a big, strong, tough third-pair defenseman that can fight is, I mean, to some degree, he's a unicorn, but I don't know that his value would be that high. Now, does the organization love him? They sure seem to. I don't know about Coach Marty St. Louis. There's certainly been a lot of tough love, I think, given from his part on Xhekaj. So I'm not convinced that he loves him enough to play him every day. And that's going to get frustrating, I think, over time for him to not be an everyday defenseman if he can't be trusted on the defensive side of the game. Like, yeah, can he fight? Sure. But you have to be able to do more than just fight to be able to play a regular NHL shift, and that's the problem. Now, we had discussed earlier, because there was also on the same podcast probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, they discussed the possibility of Xhekaj being turned into a forward. And I was like, you know what? I honestly wonder if they really should try it. If St. Louis continues to have concerns and not trust him defensively, why not? If he really is a unicorn, if that's a fair statement, and if I'm not mistaken, I think when he was in Hamilton and junior, towards the end of his junior career, I think he did play a little bit of forward. I remember I seen the Bulldogs play a lot towards the end of that year as they won the OHL championship and went to the Memorial Cup. That I'm pretty sure that they did. He could be a fourth line winger. I mean, he's got the size. Could he forecheck? He can fight. Like, that way he can do the things that you know that he's good at, and you don't have to worry so much about the defense. You can be a little bit more picky, which you can do as a defenseman as well, but like, you can be a little bit more strategic with where the line changes when he gets on the ice, the situation. He's probably not going to, you could use him if you really think on a PK. You could drop him back to D if you really need to. If you're in a situation and you get to say a couple of defensemen get hurt or something like that, he's got the experience to drop back and do spot duty. Like, it's not a completely unusual concept, and I just don't know if I agree with the trade value with that Brian Wild's talking about here. Like, a second round pick, I don't know. I think that might be a little bit generous, to be honest. I don't think there's any chance to get it first, so I don't have to worry about accepting it. Unless he's packaged in a trade with some other players or other assets to get a bigger piece or something. To some degree, I acknowledge the unicorn comparison or the, description, but I don't know that he's a strong enough unicorn really to get that much more value. But at the same time, like I said, he's got a brother in the organization, which you really can't factor in. But it's a fun concept to think about the brothers maybe playing together in the NHL, and I wouldn't be shocked if we could see maybe a fourth line duo of them. That to me sounds more interesting than if my assessment of his value is accurate and it's going to be less than a second round pick. You're probably better off to keep him and just keep trying to develop him and see if he can't make it work. But ultimately, we'll see what happens, but it's going to be an interesting year to see his development, how he's deployed, and if he can earn that trust back from Marty St. Louis. Because I know towards the tail half of the second half of the year into the playoffs, he certainly, to me, looked like there was a lot of times where he lost the trust of the coach and wasn't consistently in the lineup. But let me know what your thoughts are. Should the Habs consider trading Jack Eye? Is his value as high as this analyst has made him out to be? And should they consider a positional change? Let me know your thoughts on that, as well as Doc, the Carey Price contract trade. Should they trade Matheson? A lot of debate over that as well. I think we're going to see some interesting moves from the Montreal Canadiens, especially once the Price contract does get moved and they have more cap flexibility. Be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, the number 2 center spot's a big topic of discussion, but there could be some other things they do if they want to wait and see what they have with Kirby Dach before making any knee-jerk reactions here. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.